Influencer marketing is not only a way to promote your company's products, services, and initiatives domestically. Companies across industries can tap into the power of local influencers in foreign markets to expand brand awareness, reach new target audiences, and drive overseas sales. But it's not always easy to bridge cultures, languages, and local social media platforms. Get Global has assembled these influencer marketing experts to share what it takes to build a successful international influencer marketing strategy. Moderating our session is Joel Backler, Managing Director for Marketing and Corporate Development at Frontier Strategy Group. Heidi Nasruddin, founder of Mark Media and blogger-in-chief of theambitionista.com. Mike Prasad, founder and CEO of Tiny Sponsor. And Sarah Mills, influencer, content creator, and community manager at Tiny Sponsor. This session was captured live from Get Global in Los Angeles.
We're here today to talk about global influencers. I think being here in Los Angeles, we see a lot of things around influencer marketing. It's a very loaded term. A lot of people have different ideas about what influencer marketing is. What we're going to talk about today is a little bit about influencer marketing in general, how it's done here in the US. We have a great panel here representing a lot of different perspectives. First, to my left, we have Heidi Nasruddin. She's a prominent fashion influencer here in Los Angeles, but she also has a sizable influence over Asian markets as well. We have Sarah Mills in the middle. She too is a fashion and makeup influencer with a very substantial following here in YouTube.
Yes, I do.
And then to her left is Mike Prasad, who has a company called Tiny Sponsor. They help facilitate a lot of these influencer marketing campaigns here in the US and also with some cross-border trends as well, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So to kick things off, as we look at influencer marketing here, while there's a lot that happens here in the US, there's also a lot of opportunities for American companies or European companies to work with local influencers in overseas markets. So some of what we'll talk about today isn't just influencer marketing in general, but also how can it be used as part of an international marketing expansion strategy. But to kick things off, I'd like to turn to Sarah and just talk about just influencer marketing in general. And you've been doing this for a while now. You've seen a lot happen in the marketplace. So just what's your view on the current landscape? What's working well? What are the challenges? Just what's your view?
Influencer marketing within the US is very important. It's probably overall the best for just brand awareness, but with the right influencers, you can beat out even Facebook ads as far as seeing a return on your investment for advertising. There are some difficulties for influencers with the ever-changing algorithms. We are forever trying to have to outsmart what Facebook and Instagram are doing to change things up on us. I see brands all the time that have issues with selecting the correct influencers to activate for their campaigns. It's a common misconception that just the largest number is going to get you the most return, which is not true most of the time, I would venture to say. And you have brands as well that undervalue influencers and influencers who don't know their own value, whether they're overvaluing themselves or undervaluing themselves. And there's no standard set, really. It's hard to know. There's a lot of variables that go into that. So I would say that probably about covers it.
Got it. And I'm curious how that compares maybe to other markets. And so maybe, Heidi, how do you think this compares to some of the work that you've done in Asia? I mean, you've done a lot of work in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, and Singapore. Mm-hmm. What have you seen there?
I work with a lot of global brands, both here in the US and also in Asia. I work with Lexus, Pandora, SK2, a lot, like Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, both for the US market as well as Southeast Asia. What I find in Singapore and Malaysia, they're like the US, but maybe take 3 or 4 years of experience. Like they're still new, they're still figuring it out. But what I find always work is that even if you work with a global brand, always try to incorporate the local elements. For example, when I work with Pandora in Malaysia, we hosted an event at the Ritz-Carlton there, but we make sure that we had local influencers and talked about how they use Pandora jewelry during their holiday season and their customs, and really focus on that local aspect. Even though it's a global brand, you have to make it as localized as possible. Yeah.
And then I think the other thing is just kind of making the connection. So on one hand, you have brands on one side, you have influencers on another side, but there's a lot of different solutions that are in place, whether they're agencies, whether they're internal staff within companies, but then also marketplaces and other companies like that. And so maybe, Mike, could you talk a little bit about some of the work that you guys have done to make that connection between maybe companies from overseas markets coming to the US?
Attentive to other people.
Yeah. So if you look at the overall, look at two sides to saying that answer up, I guess. One side is like what is marketing, right? And most people think of that as a YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, et cetera. And while that's true, the idea of influence is not just people to do with social and reach. It's how many followers you have, and it's a digital social platform. That's true, but it's not just that. It's also bloggers, podcasters, people on the ground, word of mouth. These are all influence, right? So influencer marketing in the truest sense is being able to take someone who creates content of any form and then has some type of distribution, whether that's on the ground or whether it's digital or not. So that's one area. So the companies are targeting that. You have agencies who are basically talent managers, and they're either managing a brand or managing a creator, a content creator. And those are very similar to a traditional talent manager. It's a very manual process, proposal-based and pitch-based. Then you have companies that are doing analytics, so big data companies scraping the web, finding a lot of content data and raw numbers to try and infer some value. And then you have companies that are SaaS, so a software as a service platform that is helping an agency or a influencer manage that proposal process. And so that's the current landscape. Now, my strong opinion, and a little bit biased because my company is targeting this, but that approach is trying to take a traditional process, a very one-to-one process, and trying to force it to be scalable. And the reality is that individual influencers' time and effort is not scalable. Doing proposals and negotiation at scale is not really possible, especially when you're paying an agency maybe hundreds of dollars an hour to do so. So where the industry needs to go, I think one of the platforms, the opportunities in the space, is creating a marketplace platform that not just streamlines the proposal process, but bypasses it. And it says, okay, instead of saying, let's facilitate a negotiation, why does it have to be a negotiation? It should be close to a media buy, like a Facebook media buy, for example, where you're looking at a defined opportunity, and that is targeted and against a very specific sponsor, and the metrics and the details of that all come together around a very unique opportunity, but that purchasing process is true. And so that's what we do, but also what I think a lot of companies are trying to do in the space, because it's the only way you can allow us to scale beyond the industry it is right now.
Got it. And I think this whole idea of building the connection, a lot of this happens and starts with many of the people that are representing brands in here that want to leverage influencer marketing to help increase their presence either domestically or overseas. And so I think a lot of that generally starts with somebody either from within that company or within their agency reaching out to these influencers. And I'm assuming oftentimes that isn't always the ideal way to get that outreach. So maybe Heidi first and then Sarah, just talk about what do brands do really well and what do brands not do so well when they're reaching out to you to try to collaborate?
I find it's always 50-50, no matter how big or small a brand is. They either get it that we are a content creator, and then the brands that I love when they work with me is when they tell me these are our goals, whatever that is. It could be new product launch, or trying to get more people to buy, or even a combination of both, or even it's like remessaging, whatever they think is. Like I work with Tinder, and they want to they want to change that messaging from being a hookup app into more of a connection app, whatever that is. But if you tell me your goals, let me create my content. I'll work with that. And those are the great brands to work with. But it's always such a pain when a brand comes to me with like a 50-page deck of do's and don'ts, and then they take my draft, whatever that is, Instagram post or blog post, and then they change everything, and then it reads like ad copy, and then I feel like this is bad because I'm not an ad platform. I'm an influencer, and I need to write in a way that's resonating with my followers. And I always want to tell brands, like, just tell me what you want, but don't tell me how to do it. And that's always the best kind of campaigns.
Is that consistent with you, Sarah? Have you seen anything differently?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then I would say that my biggest personal frustration is being undervalued by brands when a brand approaches you and they have this long list of demands, and then they're like, here's $20. Maybe
Yeah.
not quite that bad, but it's definitely under what anyone in your sort of area would charge. And you don't want to have to retrain the people that you're communicating with and explain to them why you should be valued at something different. So that can be incredibly trying.
But I feel that's an education. I get it. Sometimes they come to me do this whole campaign, which I know would take at least 40 hours of work, and they say, would you do it for this toner and this skincare that's $100? And sometimes I really just want to take a photo of how much products I get a week to show them, I don't need your products. This is how much free stuff I get already. But I don't do that. But what I say is, listen, this is how much work it takes, and a professional photographer, blah, 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 and explain to them why that campaign would cost, a pretty good amount of money. And half the time they get it, and half the time they don't. And to me, that's fine. If you don't get it, that's not my problem anymore.
That's a really good opportunity, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of brands we have, sometimes they don't even buy because they want the distribution, they want the content.
Yeah.
So they said, hey, I need a really cool video of someone wearing my outfit, and they'll ask for the rights, and they'll pay a little bit more for that.
Yeah.
But the idea is that that's still cheaper than them hiring a photographer, hiring a model, and doing a whole shoot, and they get the distribution.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the problems that you're talking about both stem from this idea that brands are saying, they're saying, do what I want you to do. And they're saying, I have this goal, and you're just a distribution layer, and you're a dumb pipe in their minds, versus the opposite, which is saying, wait, what do you do well? What makes you unique as an influencer? What makes you content unique? Why does your audience follow you? And then seeing how instead of you being on brand for them, it should be them being on brand for you.
Yeah.
But don't you think that's the problem? Because inherently you have two brands. You have the corporate brand that wants to work with you, but then each of you has your own personal brand. So there's kind of this kind of natural conflict or balance that has to be in place. So I guess what would you say, or what advice would you give to someone that's just saying, all right, I recognize there's a lot of potential in influencer marketing. I recognize that maybe I don't have the massive budget for other forms of a multi-channel marketing campaign, but influencer marketing is something I really want to start. So I guess what advice, any of you or all of you, would you give to a brand just getting started in terms of kind of setting their initial influencer marketing program up?
For me as a content creator, I feel it's my responsibility to kind of vet the brands. I get so many emails per day, but I always ask myself, is this a brand that resonates with me or resonate with my followers? And if the answer is no, I just politely decline. If it's a yes, then we have a conversation. And starting from those common goals, for example, my market is sophisticated and stylish working women. And that's a big demographic. And if your brand fits that, then we can continue that convo. And go from there. Yeah.
I would say also having clearly defined goals when you set out, because I work also with Tiny Sponsor. So I see from the brand's perspective as well now as an influencer. And a lot of people say, we want to do influencer marketing. And I say, great. Well, what would you like to accomplish? And they don't really know, which isn't great. You're not setting goals, you're not meeting goals then if you don't know what your goals are. So,
On the goal side, we've really divvied up into 4 goals, which is visibility and awareness. It's drive a direct audience and more follower count, stuff like that. It's drive an action or create content. And I think every influencer campaign is one or many of those goals, and you need to know about that going into it on the brand side. But then on the performance side, especially say click-throughs and we want the return, like Sarah said earlier, the best influencer marketing campaigns far outperform most other paid marketing. But it only works that way when there's high alignment. So it's a qualitative metric, not a quantitative metric that matters. So is there alignment between both brands, like you said, the creator and the brand, or sponsor? And then does that resonate with their audience? And is the brand enabling the creator to do something they would want to do anyway, but they're able to do it better together in a way that's cannot be done individually, right? Because the brand's getting a unique perspective and a style from the creator is getting resources to do something amazing. So I always use a classic example of Red Bull. Is Red Bull sponsors amazing athletes to do something that the athlete could never do on the scale they could on their own, and it becomes a win-win. They're not saying, oh, hey, pitch me on how you can benefit me, Red Bull. They're saying, how can Red Bull push the limits of that athlete in a way that is a win-win for everybody? And that's a perspective that I think needs to be had when going into these campaigns.
And I think even just at a basic level, this whole idea of just finding influencers. I've spoken to a number of companies, and their executives just like, ultimately, Kim Kardashian is not going to be the right influencer and help sell products for anybody, even if you can afford whatever crazy amount she wants for a post. So how do you determine who's the right influencer for your specific brand? And then how do you go about finding them? I mean, there's definitely options out there from databases, but it's unclear where that data is coming from, what their kind of how good their followers really are. So I guess, what are the options that companies have, and what are the things to look out for when you're trying to understand, is this person legitimate and are they a good fit for my company?
There's a lot of platforms out there that do a good job at understanding whether someone's audience is fake or bots or engagement. And so a really simple way of doing that is looking at their total follower count, dividing by their average likes, and you get to see how many people actually interact with their content, which is an inference of how many people actually see their content and how many people are real that interact with it. So you can infer that just without any technology, right? There's some great companies, Hyper and Influential.co, use big data to look at this. And I think they do that really, really, really well. What they don't do is the qualitative side. And I think that you need to have both to make it work. And on the qualitative side, we have a client right now, and they're looking for single parents or millennial parents who have a crib that have a baby under 12 months. There's no numbers that are going to tell you that, right? It's all going to be contextual. And also, there's certain aesthetic and style. Let's go back to the alignment between the brand of the creator and the brand of the sponsor. And so the best campaigns, a lot of it's done manually. Yeah. There's not really a system that I've seen. We're building it, and I think we're one of the only ones building it. But outside of that, there's some platforms that generally bucket people, like, oh, you're sporty, or you're fashionable, or you're geeky. And those are really, like, it's a half step, but the best thing is to be more specific. And it's my personal belief that the only way you get that is from the creator. Creator knows who they are, they know what they create, and they know what resonates with their audience the best, because it's their audience. So we approach it by, instead of talking to the brand first, looking at broad data, we say, talk to the creator first. What do they do? What do they specialize in? What kind of content are they creating on a regular basis? Let's make that a piece of inventory. And then pull the big data in. And so we have a lot of companies that use us and use other services to get the duality in terms of qualitative and quantitative.
Sarah, how do you do it? Do you have anything for finding influencers?
You find someone, if you're working with an agency or a company, find someone who really live and breathe social media, like they are, like their phone have to be stuck to their hand. Like if they say something like, I don't look at social on Sundays and Saturdays, that's not the person for you. And what we do is, because we also work with a lot of brands that want multi-influencer campaigns, and I agree that there's big data, and also like really looking into that feed and looking at the comments and likes. And it's really easy. Like just if you want to work with an influencer, just go into like 4 or 5 of her posts, like whichever the 9, and look at the comments and the likes, and you can tell. If she has a lot of fake followers or likes, like it's gonna show. Like how come she has so many, like 20 comments? Or even if she has 100 comments, like why are the comments like looking like very fishy? Like it's not saying anything. Like you need to go in there and really look. And that's really the only way that I feel like I will really want to audit an account. Because, for example, if you have 2 influencers and both of them have 400,000 followers, one person might have an average between 4,000 to 6,000 likes, and the other one has 10 to 20,000 likes. But if you look, the 4 to 6, a lot of she's older. A lot of her followers are ghost followers. They're just looking. But her impressions are really high because they don't even like or comment. They just look. But when you look at her comment, they're like, oh my gosh, like they really are into her. And the other one, if you look at the comments, is like, I like you. Can you, it's like just thirsty guys, sorry to say. So you really have to not just look at numbers. You just have to look, and your gut feeling would tell you, like, oh, even the girl with the 10, 20K likes, like a lot of this people are not really followers. They're just into, her bikini photos and stuff. So,
but I think, so you had an account that you were looking at recently where the brands paid a lot of money for them with a lot of numbers, but it was mostly a male audience, and they had a female-focused product.
Oh, yeah. I see that a lot, actually. Yeah. So my account used to be more
Guy-centric.
Yes. Before I moved, I really did a huge rebrand and went more into makeup and fashion. And so I've seen both sides of it personally.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to other brands. One in particular did a $5,000 buy for one post from a kind of bikini influencer. And of course, her audience is like 98% male. If you looked at the comments, it's like you're saying.
Yeah.
Everything's just talking about how she looks and not... And the thing about this is that with a lot of these female influencers who cater to men, perhaps you could sell a men's product to them.
Yeah.
But generally, those men don't respect the influencer as an opinion leader. They don't care what you're talking about. So this brand told me that they'd done this $5,000 buy with this kind of bikini model, and they got 38 followers and 0 sales.
And that person like a ton of followers too.
Oh, she has over 1 million, 1.5, 2 million, something like that.
Bikini influencers usually have millions.
Yeah.
Well, I think that how it's a difference between celebrity versus influence, right? And those are different things. So like you said earlier, Kim Kardashian is a celebrity. There's a raw number conversion you can get with enough numbers, sure. But influence is tied to expertise. In a celebrity, you follow someone because you want to see more of them, and it's a very visceral type thing. If someone's an influencer, you follow them because they're an expert that you trust them for something that they're knowledgeable about. And those are the people you want to find. That's a qualitative thing. So you can use the raw data, but you've got to do what you're saying, which is really look at it and say, is that interaction for expertise or is it for celebrity?
Yeah, so there's this really clear differentiation between just being famous for famous sake versus having true influence over a particular subject matter.
Exactly.
Something else that seems to be pretty common just in the industry right now that a lot of people are talking about is this difference between short-term versus long-term. So how does a brand work with an influencer on a one-off basis on maybe just one campaign and then just disappear and never work with that influencer again? Or there's this idea of kind of these long-term influencer relations departments within companies. You see companies like Microsoft and IBM doing this in the B2B space. I guess, what's your view on just what's the best way for a company to build a relationship with an influencer over time and have them build a true affinity for that brand and not have it be so transactional about, how much are you going to pay me?
I love this question because what I find is if you're a newer brand or you're a brand that hasn't really worked with influencers, start with a small set of influencers. Maybe you're a brand that caters to millennial moms. Just work with 10, millennial moms on a small campaign and see which ones really resonate. And then maybe the second time onwards, work with, 2 or 3 of the highest or most top performing influencers from there. And I think that's really how to do it because you won't know until you do it. Like, for example, when I first start, like I work with a lot of brands, like I'll take any brand that is, even half in accordance with my audience. But then now that I have a better platform and I know exactly what my followers want and I have a bigger audience, I actually love working with a few brands on a long-term basis because it's more genuine and it's more authentic. Because I feel if, let's say, you're my follower, you see me using SK2 one time, you say, oh, great, that's awesome. But if you see me using SK2 like over a whole year, you're going to be like, she really loves it. She really loves this brand, and I'm gonna try it out. And that's really what happened. So I work with, 4 Seasons on a long-term basis. I work with SK2 and I work with Lexus, and they can really see that connection between, they see me using it one time, they say, oh, great, whatever. But the 7th time, they go like, you know what? I'm going to go to a Lexus dealership. Like, she even with Instagram, a DM, a photo, like, Heidi, like, I really love Lexus because of you. I'm going to go there. And that's really, as an influencer, is what you want.
What does Lexus do that makes you want to stick with them for the long term? Because on one hand, it's great if the company wants to work with you for a while, but what do they do that makes you genuinely want to work with them?
Well, first of all, we work on a small campaign first, which is nothing to do with the car. But as you know, Lexus wants to position us as a lifestyle brand. So we work at the LA Food and Wine Festival, where I talk about how Lexus is amazing and they have all these great chefs and stuff. And then from there, I talk to their marketing people and I went into the car and like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe this car has Wi-Fi, that kind of stuff. And it drives great. And then we work on a more bigger campaign, and they told me more about the alliance, and I'm like, I really like this car. And then, during New York Fashion Week, we work on a bigger, larger scale campaign, and they drove me around for 5 days, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a great car. Like, this is going to be my second, my next upcoming car. So it's like I really got to know the brand. Likewise for SK2, like I tried one product, I really liked it, and then suddenly I realized 6 months later, everything I use is SK2, and I love it. And you love the brand when I actually go to Sephora and buy it. My boyfriend was like, why don't you just ask them for the tone? I'm like, no, I like it. I need to buy it right now. So then I know it's a great fit. But like I said, you have to really believe in the products that you want to represent or become an ambassador of, because if you don't feel it, like your audience, they're not stupid. They can tell you're just doing it, for the money.
Yeah, the best influencer is someone who should be your customer,
Yeah.
and maybe isn't yet, right?
Yeah.
And figuring out what that is, and the same way you do any kind of customer targeting. With all of our brands that we work with, we started as recommending do 10 people, but like a couple $100 each, really small, and don't even worry about follower count, because we want to know what audiences and what personalities resonate with the brand, and no matter what your theories are, you need to prove it. Do that, and then double down on that, like you were saying.
Yeah.
The other thing I think brands need to understand to kind of go long term is they need to view an influencer, like social as a whole. So with Kogi, so one of my previous companies was Kogi Barbecue, which was the very first social media food truck, and it started the trend of social media food trucks about 10 years ago. And once we were really successful, and then everyone tried to copy us, and everyone's like, oh, I'm just going to get on Twitter, and my food truck's going to make a bunch of money. And that's not true, because social media is an accelerator. It's not a driver per se. The product is the driver. The product is good, and you put it in the right environment, it's going to expand, and it's going to grow and scale. And so influencers are the same way. If you have a really good product, and you find an influencer who is actually a ideal customer, their enthusiasm and the engagement is going to scale. And so you need to find a way to test and then double down, but really understand that if it's scaled and if you see those patterns, then you be that person and say, great, this is working. Where do you think, what the brand asks the influencer, what can they do that they think is going to be more resonant and more innovative in the content that maybe not be tied to the brand, but will be a mixture of the brand's goals and the influencer's understanding. And that combination allows it to scale even further and become a successful long-term campaign.
No, that was a really good point on just something that I think is really important right now in the marketplace. And another thing that I think starts coming up again and again when we're talking about influencer marketing, especially here in the US, is how much does a follower account matter? How much do you need that big celebrity influencer versus kind of this whole idea of micro-influencers? And I think micro-influencers is kind of I'd say the hot term of 2017 in the influencer marketing space. How do you approach micro-influencers? That these are people that don't necessarily have the brand recognition. They're people that might not have the most followers, and you're probably going to work with a lot of them instead of a small number. So that must be a lot more logistical nightmares. So I guess what's your view on micro-influencers and kind of how can brands work with them?
You mean how to find them? Is that your question?
I mean, how to find them, and then how to manage the fact that you're probably working with several of them instead of just one or two.
Well, you need a lot of manpower for sure. Go ahead.
I'm trying really hard not to plug my company, because that's like literally the problem we're trying to solve. But it is. It's traditionally it's a lot of manpower, right?
Yeah.
It's building lists. Sarah knows you've built how many lists.
This is my job at Tiny Sponsor. I do creator relations, so.
And so we build these lists, right? Like, and for us, we're building a list, and then we're inviting them to our platform. And once on our platform, those creators are saying, this is what we do, and this is my price, and this is my package, and then any brand can then purchase that over and over again, which is great. So we only build the list once. But if you're an agency or a brand, you're building those lists every single week, and you're doing it all through email, and there's no data, and it's all one-to-one. And that's actually the problem with the industry right now, is that 99% of companies out there treat this as a proposal-based process. So while micro-influencers do have the highest conversion rate, like average engagement for micro-influencers is 7 to 15%.
Yeah.
A celebrity will have 2 to 3% engagement, because micro-influencers have a more personal relationship with their audience. The other advantage of micro-influencers is that they're micro. Like you can do 20 buys for a couple $1,000, and you can get that feedback, and you can get much more content out of it. So you're bang for the buck. The sweet spot, what we found from data, industry and our data, is like someone between 25 to 250,000 followers. That range is a really good sweet spot for price versus engagement versus conversion. But there are very few places where you can do that easily without having to do it as this massive amount of scouting and amount of time for a very, very small spend.
Got it. And I think something you touched upon there is just ROI and just knowing the impressions and things that kind of come out of these influencer campaigns, I think a lot of people tend to report within these companies on these vanity metrics. But what suggestions do you have for companies that want to demonstrate that they're spending this money, they're investing in, potentially a function that's helping to, engage influencers and manage those relationships? I guess, how do you measure ROI, and how do you know if this is something that's actually worthwhile?
Well, it depends on the goals of the campaign. I mean, if it's like it is to product, new product launch or trying to discover new products, and I guess impressions and reach really count. But if it's conversion, and you look at those conversion, click to action rates, so I think it really depends.
Know your goal. Like
Yeah.
that's if you can't measure something you don't understand, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't know what your goal is, then there's no way to measure it. But once you know that, actually measurement's pretty easy.
Yeah.
You look at your growth in the period, you look at your click-throughs, you look at all that stuff. So the ROI varies. What we've tried to do is look at the data around spend and say similar goals. So for Instagram, the closest comparison is going to be Facebook ads, and looking at, well, what does it cost on a Facebook ad to get a click versus a like versus an engagement, and backing that to, okay, great. So for this person, for this interaction, for this engagement, and what their average comments, likes, clicks is, what would that cost just by buying Facebook ads, right? And then you can kind of get a baseline. Well, okay, if you spend $100, then this person is worth at least $100, and maybe more because they're doing other stuff besides just that. And then going from there, then you can judge your ROI and whether that makes sense for your whatever your metric is, right?
Yeah. And so I guess this next question would be to Sarah and Heidi. Is you're thinking about your experience working with different brands, and for the ones that have done it well, what does that end-to-end process look like from the initial outreach to the collaboration with them to whether or not you decide to work with them again? Can you think of any examples maybe of ones that went particularly well and what some of those things were?
So many to choose from. Well, the ones that work really well is when they are very clear on what the goals are, and then they know their goals, whatever those goals are, and they let me do whatever I do, which is create content that would align with those goals, and then be very clear as well about do's and don'ts from the get-go. Like, for example, when I work with Revlon, they were very demanding, but in a good way, because they're like, these are our goals. We need to reach, more sophisticated women who would traditionally not buy Revlon, but buy Sephora, but we want them to see Revlon as a good alternative, and that's my demographic, women with a higher spending limit. But we want to introduce them to Revlon and tell them, you don't have to spend $100 on foundation to look great. You can actually spend, $50 or $60 or this range of products. And with that, we create a series of campaigns about how wearing Revlon, and also they have these all new products that are like long lasting, how that would help them, women, to go out and do work and not worry about makeup and look great and save money. All this is key points. And we gave them, and because they were very clear about the goals and were very clear about the kinds of images they like, and give me visual examples, once I delivered them, they were like, oh, they actually liked the images, and me being professional, even though they said we only want 5 images, we gave them 15, because I like my client to have options. So they love it, and then the campaign went well. I mean, that's my ideal scenario of, it's a communication. Like we get on a call, I give them like a storyboard of what I want to do, and once they say they like it, we do it. Yeah. The worst is when you tell me your goals or you don't know what your goals are. Like actually when people say, just do whatever, I get kind of like a panic attack. I'm like, that can mean anything. What do you mean whatever? I can, that would mean like, okay, there's 1,000 things I can do. And 99% of the time when this client, the one that says whatever, when we give them something, no, that's not really what I want. What I feel is I want, and I'm like, oh my gosh, if only you told me from, day one. Yeah.
How about you, sir?
I would say, I feel like she's about covered all of it. Also, again, with being undervalued, when you have a brand that comes to you, and I briefly touched on this earlier, but if you have a brand that comes to you with a huge proposal of all the things that they want and their goals and what they require of you, a bunch of images, unlimited rights, and then you're negotiating up from a very, very low rate because they have no idea what the market value would be of that, and you see it with larger and smaller brands. Sometimes I'm surprised because you see a brand that you know would have a larger budget that's approaching and saying, okay, I want this giant list of things in professional photos, and I only want to give you like $200 or something.
Wow.
You know, whatever. It's just much less than your rate would be. And then you're starting from this point where, again, you have to kind of say, okay, well, this isn't going to work. Or I've had people send me stuff for free.
And demanding.
And then demand a whole bunch of stuff. And it's like, yeah, I might, put your stuff in my post. If it's something I like, then I'll agree to include this sometimes in a post. Especially if it's something I would have already bought for myself. Mm-hmm. But, maybe I liked it, but I wouldn't have bought it for myself necessarily. And then the company hits you up and they're like, so we want 4 images edited. I'm like, no.
I can't believe that's still happening right now.
It is.
But what needs to happen? I mean, it seems like this whole pricing thing is a big issue because you have people that are charging different rates in very similar circumstances. You have people that are maybe have almost the exact same audience demographics, and yet one's charging a high amount, the other's charging a low amount. What needs to happen in the marketplace for there to be more standardization of pricing?
I feel just like magazines now have their media kits and pricing out there, I feel more bloggers need to be more transparent with their pricing.
Transparency, 100%.
Yeah, because if you look at magazines, whether it's Vogue or Harper's, like you know exactly how much that full ad page would cost because their media kits and pricings are out there. So for a lot of bloggers, like a lot of people won't even want to say how much they charge or even admit that they're getting money, because they're like, oh, it's all a negotiation, and that's great, but you need to be very frank. These are my rates, and then the industry would be in a way equal, because if everyone is hiding how much, it's hard. It's hard for a brand. I don't know, she's charging $2K, this is charging $500.
There's no standard. I always try to analogize someone that no one argues with, which is a lawyer, right? Yeah. If you go to a certain high-end law firm, it's like $500 plus an hour. Yeah. And you're not going to argue with that. You're going to say, okay, well, I get why you're a super high-end law firm. And yeah, maybe you might say, can I buy in bulk? Can I do a deal? But the rate is set. And, and you negotiate from that standard. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, what everyone naturally needs to do as a creator and understand what their value is. And then set that as a standard and say, wait, maybe this person, we had an influencer that was charging like $5,000 for a post, where someone else with the same stats was charging $1,000. But that influencer who's charging $5,000 is luxury. They have high engagement. They do a professional motor shoot. She's a pseudo celebrity, so she has some notoriety. And so therefore, and she's basically endorsing the brand. So that combination has more value than just the post. And therefore she's charging more. But there's without transparency, no one knows the difference. And that's the problem.
And you do see people undercutting each other, essentially, that offer the same exact thing. And they're like, well, I'll probably get more gigs, more posts if I charge half of what everyone else is charging. Yeah. And that can make it really tough, because you then have a brand that approaches you and says, oh, well, this person that's really similar to you quoted us half of what you're saying.
Yeah. But there's actually another half of that. It makes it even trickier, which is that the value of the post is relative to the brand. So if for example, I'm a food influencer and I'm really specializing in cocktails and fusion food. So for a cocktail brand or liquor brand, I'm a really great buy. But for a beer, I'm a horrible buy. I'm worth a fraction of the value to them. And so there also has to be an understanding of this influencer might get paid more if they're a really good match to that brand, because it's so well attuned that the conversion will be higher.
Well, I guess just one of my last questions for you before we kind of close the panel is just, how do you strike that balance as an influencer? It seems like authenticity is kind of a word you hear that comes up again and again when you're talking about influencers. So on one hand, you need to make a living. You need to get paid to do this. You're investing a lot of money. You're creating a lot of content, and it's not easy. But at the same time, you also need to make sure that you're providing genuine value to your audience. You're not misleading them. I mean, we have FTC regulations that come to play. So I guess what are your thoughts in terms of what do influencers need to do to strike that right balance between adding value to their audience, but also making sure they can make a living?
Well, I guess treating your blog or your social media presence as a business. And how I do it is I actually, write down my costs. Okay, this is how much it costs to run my blog, to have a social media assistant, to have an actual assistant. Let's say at this level, I have all that. And this is how much time it costs me to run my blog. Taking all that into account, actual costs, and add on a margin of what I need to survive. if I was to do this full time. And then okay, let's say I need $5,000 minimum to survive a month. Let's say I know per campaign I need to, let's say, earn 2,500. So I know I need to have 2 campaigns a month, and that's really my math. Like, I don't think about anything else. Like, I know I have to hit X amount of campaigns a month at minimum level to have this content creation business, and then that's really it. And if someone says, oh, I can only pay you $300 a month to post this stuff, I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not my level anymore. Go somewhere else. Like, it's really, to me, sometimes it is a question of math.
What about you, sir?
You definitely do have to disclose all the stuff now with the FTC, which many people avoided, including celebrities and very large influencers. They avoided doing for a very long time. Instagram has just made that easier for us with the paid content notation at the top. But
and Facebook as well.
Oh yeah, and Facebook. I haven't done very much with Facebook.
Yeah.
I feel like the pages have gotten kind of sad. And it's just making sure that you're not diluting the integrity of your brand as well. So you had mentioned long-term partnerships earlier. If you are promoting 4 different skincare brands of the same, I use this moisturizer, I use this moisturizer, no, I use this moisturizer, people are not going to believe you. It's not going to be, so you can't water down your content, and you really have to choose carefully what it is that you're selecting, what brands that you're working with, and what products you're promoting.
I think it's know your value, know why you're differentiated, and know what you do uniquely, and then charge accordingly. You can only do so many of those things.
Yeah.
It's very similar to being a consultant. You only have so many hours in a day, and you know what you're specialist at. Then the brands that fit that will pay a lot more money for you to do that because it's a good match. And so just a lot of influencers don't know that.
Yeah.
And that's an issue.
And they're also not good at rejecting campaigns. I think one of the things that a lot of influencers that I see is that, any brand that comes their way and pay, they'll just do it. And you can do that once in a while. Hey, I get it. You have to pay your bills, especially at the start. But you can't be like every single brand that comes to you, okay, because they pay you an X amount, you want to, take them on. You have to say, no, this is not right. Or if you've done one skincare campaign last month, you can't be like, this month, it's all about this brand B. It doesn't work like that.